Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 2 of the Q&A, so let's go ahead and knock this out. First question. Do you think that in starting strength program, you must be over 500 calorie surplus to progress for a long amount of time, or you can be in a 500 cal surplus and progress for a long amount of time? People been saying that you must be at 1000 cal surplus to succeed doing the program. All right, this is one of those to where I disagree with Mark Ripto. He's trying to get guys as big and as strong as possible, as quick as possible, and he doesn't care if you gain 20, 25, 30 pounds of body fat doing so. You have to remember, starting strength was written for high school football players, okay? It was not written for other people, and if you follow his nutritional advice, he's just trying to get you ready to be a lineman to play against other 16 and 17-year-olds. So you need to put weight and strength on and muscle, fat, everything as quick as possible. Now, that being said, no, you don't need 1,000 calorie surplus. I think a 500 would be perfectly acceptable, but what you will need to do is realize that if you gain any significant amount of muscle quickly and your workloads go up and you're doing conditioning work on top of it as your conditioning improves, your energy intake is going to go up through the roof. And eventually, it might not be unreasonable that by the end of the program, your TDEE, which is your total daily energy expenditure, is up to 1,000 calories higher than where you started. That's actually pretty common. So what I'm going to say is that go ahead and do a 500 calorie surplus. And you may not even need to count it. Just make sure that you're slowly gaining weight would be my best advice. I think too many guys focus on counting calories instead of simply making sure their portions are big enough for the scale to be going up or down. I think calorie counting for anyone who's not a serious competitive athlete or who needs to have major weight loss going on is probably not the best approach. But if you're going to do the calorie counting, because you probably are doing this because you want to be a serious athlete, 500 calories to start, and then gradually increase that. And what I mean is about every 6 weeks or so, add another 100 calories to whatever you're eating. So if you started at 2,800 calories because your maintenance was around 2,300, 6 weeks in, go ahead and increase it to 29. Another 6 weeks in, go ahead and increase it to 30. And that way you'll stay ahead of the curve as far as stalling, because what will happen is on a 500 calorie surplus before long, pretty quickly actually, probably by the third month, that will become your new maintenance. You're going to stop gaining weight. If you're not gaining weight on that program, you're going to struggle with your lifts. You're going to struggle to make progress. So you're going to need to be gaining weight continually on that program. But the 1,000 calorie a day surplus, you need to understand, is essentially you're going to be gaining a pound of body fat every single week if you do it that way. And around the 5 or 6 month mark, that's going to start getting pretty horrific. As you can imagine, a pound of fat every week, 4 pounds a month, that's 20 to 25 pounds of fat by the time you get to the 5 or 6 month mark, in addition to any muscle that you gain. So I can see how a lot of guys would be concerned about that. So again, you got to keep in mind what the goals are of his program. The reason he has guys drinking a gallon of milk a day if they struggle to get in calories, so just straight whole milk. All right, next question. Jason, I have trouble breathing during the bent over row, even during the eccentric portion of the pull. Every other movement I can breathe fairly easily. This results in me just holding my breath the entire time. Any advice on how to correct this? This is because your stomach and diaphragm is hitting the top of your thighs. You need to adjust your position on this exercise. You need to go ahead and do just barely a bend in the knee. You don't want to do it straight leg, but it's guys who tend to squat down when they do this exercise, or they have their feet way too close together who run into this trouble breathing. Again, it's because your thighs are hitting your diaphragm and squishing it, and that's what's causing you the problem. So if you manage to keep your upper back flat and not rounded over, and you can avoid letting your stomach touch your thighs at any point in the exercise, that will resolve it. Again, quit squatting down. You need to stand up like you're doing a stiff leg deadlift on any type of row, which means no more than a 10 to 15 degree bend in your knee. And if that doesn't fix the problem, because you're not actually seeing any contact happening there between your hip or your thigh with your actual stomach, then you might have another medical issue going on that you might want to go see your doctor about and have them just investigate, explain the situation, explain what I told you and that you changed it and the problem didn't go away. They might want to make sure that you don't have some sort of problem with your lungs, maybe a small puncture or hole in your lung or something going on that they need to investigate. So again, when you see abnormal things like that, that's a good sign that maybe there's a medical issue you might need to address. But I can assure you 90% chance it is because you're standing incorrectly. All right, next question. Thoughts on the 5-3-1 method and using conditioning work such as loaded carries, prowler pushes to help out powerlifting. I read in Greg Nuckols' recent AMA on Reddit, he thinks that powerlifting programs could benefit from loaded carries for just general strength and conditioning. What are your thoughts? All right, brief thoughts on the 5-3-1 itself, because that doesn't seem to be the bulk of your question. I think it works for about 50% of people, and the other half of people it sucks. It works a lot better for guys on drugs than it does for naturals. Just my opinion. And I think that you need to carefully select your accessory work if you're trying to do it drug-free as far as overlapping different muscle groups. But I've done whole videos on that before in the past. I think I've covered that in 3 entire full videos over the years. Now, as to your other question, I agree with Greg Nuckols on this one. I think Greg is right. Greg is right 80% of the time anyways, 80 to 90% in my experience. On this one, he's in that 80 to 90%. He's right. Loaded carries, farmer's walks, sled pulls, prowler pushes, things like that, as long as they're not pushing you into a chronic overreaching position with your lower body, say your quads, glutes, things like that, due to just excessive volume of training, as long as you're adapted to the workload, and again, you're not reaching an overtrained state with it, they're perfectly acceptable. I think they're a good way to build overall strength. I think they're a good way to build overall function, and that will help you as any sort of strength athlete. It doesn't matter whether you're a power lifter, strongman, Olympic lifter, football player. Any strength athlete is going to benefit from that sort of heavy conditioning work. So I think it's definitely a good idea, and it's definitely the sort of stuff that you can do at home. If you have a house and everything and a backyard of your own, I mean, stuff like that is stuff you could easily do at home as well, so you don't even have to go to the gym, because most gyms aren't equipped for it, but some are. But yeah, absolutely. It's just called GPP work. It's just general physical preparedness, and I would say 90% of your championship powerlifters around the world actually incorporate GPP regularly into their training. So I think Greg's right on this one. If you want to be a better power lifter, it wouldn't be a bad idea to incorporate some of it into your training as your conditioning work. All right, next question. Hi Jason, what is your opinion on stance width on the squat? The evidence suggests that a wide stance, about 150% of shoulder width, activates the glutes more than normal stance, and the quad activation remains the same. Also, the wide stance feels more natural to me. Will it wear out your hips in the long term when combined with deadlift? All right, honestly, there is no right or wrong answer here. I generally tell guys, though, that if your goals are overall strength and athleticism and you don't plan on performing the squat in competition, in some sort of actual competition, I don't recommend a wide stance at all. I recommend high bar Olympic style squatting, preferably without a belt. I think that is the best for overall athleticism due to the improved range of motion, the deeper stretch you can get on it, all of the above. However, you will oftentimes lift as much as 5% less weight on your heaviest sets and your maxes doing it, and losing 5% of the poundages on the bar is not ideal for being a competitive power lifter. So that being said, it depends on what you're going to do with it. And as far as stance width affecting your hips or wearing them out, there is no universal answer. Again, stuff I've covered in the past, I could cover again. It turns out that human hip sockets and joints and angles vary so much within our species that it's mind-boggling. Like, we as a species have such a diverse hip structure development from person to person, even within the same racial and ethnic groups. It doesn't even seem to affect it, meaning even if you take any ethnic group from any part of the world on Earth and you look at their structure, it varies just as much within that group as it does around the globe. So it's not even based upon where your people came from, and I don't fully understand why that is, but it just seems to be the case that we all have very, very different hip structures just from family to family. So your neighbor down the street, whose ancestors came from the same country as you, might have 10 or 15 degrees difference on his hip structure angle than you do. It's just crazy like that. So accordingly, finding a perfect squat stance that doesn't put the wear or shearing stress or anything on your hip joints personally actually takes a bit of trial and error and trying to look at your own anatomy and seeing how everything rotates. And so finding the perfect width and the perfect toe position for an individual can actually take quite a bit of work in looking at it. And remember, just because it's good for you doesn't mean it's good for your workout partner. And that's an important thing to keep in mind there. It really varies that much, and that can't be understated enough. All right, next question. Hey Jason, what is your opinion on using a trap bar instead of a traditional barbell for deadlift? Does the trap bar have any greater benefit to it in terms of safety, etc., or are they both equal? Thanks. All right, the trap bar is going to vary a bit, but usually you can lift a little more weight with a trap bar if you're using handles that are at the normal position that the barbell would be in and relative to your shin. But if you're using higher handle ones, you're going to be able to lift up to 50, 80, maybe even in some cases 100 pounds more on the trap bar. The thing that you need to realize with the trap bar deadlift, though, is that it is a hybrid exercise that is basically 2/3 deadlift, 1/3 squat. It's just that you're squatting with the weight down below you. It's actually like a half squat combined with a deadlift. And accordingly, it works your thighs a little more than a traditional deadlift, your quads, but it also works your back and particularly your spinal erectors considerably less. So that's the reason a lot of field athletes do it. But the thing I want to stress there is that if you're using that instead of the conventional deadlift with a barbell, you are going to develop your lower back less than you will that way. The conventional deadlift will simply strengthen and develop your lower back more. It will be stronger and more powerful from doing it. However, the lower back tends to recover slowly, and so a lot of field athletes who want most of the benefits of the deadlift, who are going to take a lot of impacts on the field, such as football players, rugby players, any contact sport, they can't deadlift as frequently because their lower back can't be in an unrecovered state all the time when they're out there on the playing field, because it will affect their performance. And so that's why you see so many football players utilizing the trap bar, is because it allows them to get the benefits of the deadlift, the majority of them, without taxing their lower back and spinal erectors as much, so that they can do their other work more frequently without their lower back becoming an issue. So it's really a different exercise, and you need to understand that, and that's kind of the difference. And so I gave you an example of an application as to where it would actually be used successfully. But if you want the most powerful lower back possible, doing the conventional deadlift with a barbell is going to be the better choice. All right, next question. What is your opinion on looking versus not looking in the mirror while doing compound movements? Well, I'll state this. There is a reason mirrors are banned in many of the top athletic and strength gyms in the world. They're absolutely not allowed to be inside the gym or on the walls, and particularly at all. And the reason for that, mirrors hurt you. Looking in the mirror when you're performing compound movements is a good way to injure yourself. It is probably one of the number one causes of injuries because it causes form breakdown. But the worst is when people turn to the side to look at what they're doing in the mirror. That is how people injure their backs on doing rows, on deadlifts, on squats, things like that, is turning to the side to look in the mirror to check their own form or what they're doing. Probably contributes to 70 to 80% of injuries on these exercises, and that is how you actually damage your back. That's, in my experience, the most common way to herniate a disc in your back, is doing that. So mirrors, no, they're off limits. Number two, even watching yourself in the mirror when you squat or deadlift changes your neck position. It forces you to change from a neutral neck or whatever neck position that you started in. It forces you to move your neck up or down to watch yourself in the mirror. And by doing that, you're messing up your alignment of your neck and then messing up the alignment of your back on the exercise, and you can put yourself into a compromising position. So looking in the mirrors when performing any of these big movements is probably the worst thing you can do. And in all honesty, if people were really serious about the safety of their lifters, they would ban them everywhere but the little dumbbell area where everyone does their curls and stuff. They would actually take all the mirrors off from all the other sections of a gym if they were really serious about safety. Just my opinion there. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.